this next 30 minutes, I'm going to be talking about the Climate Action Living Laboratory, which is another unique program at Virginia Tech that sets us apart. I was sort of handed the baton on this a month ago, and so this is very fresh, this is very new, this is very experimental. And so if folks have any input or ideas, feel free to flag me and talk to me about it or to offer them. The more ideas, the merrier, because I have a vision about what I would like this to look like, but I need this vision to be shaped by a lot of stakeholders and input. And so as I talk, all of this is preliminary, all of this is up for change. This is probably the most loosely formed section of any of the talks you're going to see today. So I just want to caveat that at the start. So what makes the university run here, right? Like, we're primarily an educational enterprise, but we're also a major research enterprise. We take in hundreds of millions of dollars of federal and state money every year for research, and we provide an education to the students as well as housing. We provide food. We provide regular maintenance for all the buildings that are necessary for those things. And so what makes the university run, it sort of is everybody. It's the students who contribute to the campus environment and community here. It's the faculty who foster and further the educational mission of the campus. It's the staff members who make sure that all these systems are running and running efficiently. And it's the administrators who are allocating the budget to ensure all those processes are supported. And so really, in order to implement any of the things that you've seen here today, and we'll see in the afternoon today, we need everybody's help, right? And so that's what I'm sort of coming here today to talk about. But how do we get everybody involved? That's an important question. We are a $1.7 billion institution. That's the yearly operating cost for this university. And on Friday, we'll find out what that looks like for next year. It's probably going to be 1.7 to 1.8 billion. We have a $1.4 billion foundation that manages our scholarships and a lot of our real estate and a lot of our property. We are a massive enterprise. We have 30,000 undergraduate students, 7,000 graduate students, I think 3,000 or 4,000 faculty members, and about 12,000 staff members, right? We're a small city based out of this university. And that takes a lot of effort to run, and also takes a lot of compartmentalizing to run. Not everybody can have their voice heard all the time. It would be exhausting if we were all in meetings getting feedback from, dining services as opposed to the people who directly oversee dining services. And so the nature of an institution this large is that you get a lot of siloing that happens, but the problem is that siloing runs counter to the collaborative mission of the Climate Action Commitment and the need to get everybody on board, because there's not really a good place across campus to get input from everybody, right? We try in a bunch of different areas, but we don't necessarily succeed. So the Climate Action Living Laboratory, or the CALL as I'm going to call it, is one of our main mechanisms put forward in the Climate Action Commitment to help integrate some of these siloed departments. And specifically what we're looking to do here is that we want to bring together the facilities and operations side of the university with the academic and student-centered side of the university, because right now they're sort of cleaved apart. So a Climate Action Living Laboratory is not new to Virginia Tech. It is an existing framework that's been applied at other universities, but interestingly enough, it's mostly been applied at other universities like Harvard, like Cornell, like Stanford, like universities with major endowments and funding support that Virginia Tech doesn't necessarily have. We are, again, $1.7 billion in our operating costs, but compared to universities like Harvard, that's a drop in the bucket, right? That's a minute operating cost to have for a university of that scale, for example. Even our competitors, we do a lot with very little. That's what Virginia Tech is known for. And we manage to keep costs lowest in the Commonwealth while keeping the quality of education high because of that ethos. But what's important here when it comes to the Climate Action Living Laboratory framework is that these other universities have been able to pump tens of millions of dollars that we don't have access to into their CALL frameworks. And this leads to a very professionalized program. They have a lot of staff members who support it. They have a lot of educational programs that feed students into professional development programs. And it's really used to manage sort of larger scale internship programs and professional development for students. That's the main focus for these other universities. Now, because of all these complications, we have to do something a little bit differently. And while a lot of universities take this as to do something at like a smaller scale of what Harvard's doing, one of the things that sets Virginia Tech apart and that makes it unique and able to carry out its mission is that we take this opportunity to think differently about how we could implement a Climate Action Living Laboratory. So on campus, we're experimenting with a set of goals that have even greater benefit than a lot of these Ivy League universities with deeper pockets, but do it at a fraction of the cost. That's the idea that we're trying to put forward for the Climate Action Living Laboratory. So the idea here is that we want to break down some of the silos and increase the cooperation between facilities, operation, and academics. This means a couple of things when it comes to academics, right? We want to encourage interdisciplinary and larger scale research projects for faculty members. Right now, a lot of faculty member research is done off campus, or the benefits of the innovative technologies that they're developing, the innovative modes of practicing agriculture, of tying agriculture into more sustainable uses of land, such as agrivoltaics, are done off campus or done at very small scale agricultural sites on campus, right? We want to open that up and open the campus up as a living laboratory to larger scale research projects. So we want to increase both the scale of grant funding that research groups get access to, as well as the kinds of grant funding research groups get access to. To give a quick example of this, we're taking a look at the same federal legislation that earlier groups are, the Inflation Reduction Act, the infrastructure bill, right? That provision tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars for large-scale infrastructural changes around sustainability. Typically, that money was not available to faculty members. There's not a strong research component in these bills. They're mostly meant to improve the infrastructure. But what we want to do through this Climate Action Living Laboratory framework is basically say, hey, if you provide your faculty expertise to us, your technological expertise, your implementation expertise, to provide cutting-edge strategies for making sure that we are sustainable in the next 30 years, then we will open up the campus infrastructure as a kind of testing site for your work. So we're going from small-scale agrivoltaics to utility-scale agrivoltaics. And with that, we want to bring in hundreds of millions of dollars in additional federal and state funding for grants, right? This is one way that we actually generate revenue for the university through this program and get a higher research portfolio. If you're a faculty member, this is highly desirable because you want to be world recognized for this $100 million research grant that you get, and we're trying to encourage that to happen. However, we also recognize this is going to require more interdisciplinarity, more collaboration between colleges to take into account the climate justice considerations, the agricultural considerations, along with the electrical engineering questions, right? We're going to have larger and more collaborative research teams to handle these sorts of projects. And so we also want to encourage the interdisciplinary ethos to bridge the gap between different colleges as well, and to foster a more collaborative rather than competitive environment around academics. However, because we're primarily an educational institution, we also want to empower student learning. And we want students to feel as though they can make a really substantial impact on the built environment at campus. We already do that a little bit with our Green RFP program, which allows you to submit financial requests and budget requests for programs or equipment or just infrastructure that improves the sustainability of campus. But we want this to be integrated into every student's learning experience here at Tech. We want classes to be able to make a transformative impact on campus, and for students to come back next year or after they graduate and see the impact that they've managed to have in their 4 years here, right? We want to deepen the level of experiential learning available and give students a hands-on, approach to implementing a lot of climate action initiatives on campus. This not only benefits us in facilities and campus planning, because it broadens the scope of labor we have access to for implementing a lot of these things, but it also deepens the pedagogy that students are exposed to and the kinds of skills that get developed at Virginia Tech. And so the idea is that we want to really try to implement this, integrate this into the curriculum across multiple colleges and really across the university as a whole. However, this takes a lot of work, and if we're not going to have a fully funded staff, there's only a certain number of ways that we can actually manage to pull this off. So this is where we get into a little bit of the experimental stuff. So what I'm proposing for the Climate Action Living Laboratory is a form of what's called horizontal leadership structure. And this is taken from a field of study called social movement and management studies that posits that instead of having sort of dedicated hierarchical staff structures for implementing climate action climate action living laboratory, we need to have leaders across the campus that each have a horizontal stake in the operations of the Climate Action Living Laboratory and can help facilitate these changes, right? It's often referred to as a leader-full sort of structure rather than having a individually led structure of management. This is challenging because everybody's time is in demand, everybody is busy, everybody is overworked, and really what we need to do is create a value proposition for people to get involved and to really push this forward that is cost-effective and that empowers people and that people feel is worth their time and input and effort to do. Because that's been one of the major obstacles we faced, is that the incentive structures are just simply not there in a lot of ways to encourage this sort of academic partnership, right? If you're a faculty member going up for tenure, why should you support this initiative? Why is this important? What benefits are we bringing to the table and encouraging to make this worth your while? And so that's part of the thinking that we're developing as we build up this climate action living laboratory structure. And again, very new, open to suggestions and ideas, but these are sort of the main values guiding what we want this to look like at the end of the day. Already mentioned this, it's very experimental, and we welcome any and all people involved. You know, we want staff input, we want student input, we want faculty input. And in fact, we have a pretty big network already established to help implement this work. So thanks in no small part to John Randolph and his just massive social network on campus when it comes to sustainability, we already have over 150 faculty members, students, and staff involved in this sort of network of call faculty. Now, there's no real formal structure to get them together, so we're relying heavily on the climate action, or the Climate Sustainability Education and Research Subcommittee for the CASE committee. However, we're trying to have that change. We're trying to establish a formal structure, and that's going to be one of the major first steps so that we can incentivize faculty participation, so we can take advantage of the fact that so many faculty across campus are already doing work in sustainability and have a passion for it and want to contribute, but the incentive structure is just not there to make it worth their time and to really empower them to be able to do this and to bring students into the fold. And so we are hoping to formalize this so that we can make their participation counted and beneficial for their career here at Virginia Tech. We've also been working to expand our experiential learning program, both with Kim Filler's office through the provost, as well as just class partnerships with the Office of Sustainability. We go to dozens of classes every year, network with thousands of students every year to help bring awareness of the climate action commitment and of these different educational experiential learning opportunities to the students. And I'm really proud of the Office of Sustainability interns that Nathan and Emily supervise every single year, who are a key part of this and are a real strong model for what we want student engagement in the call to look like. And we're also working to build resources. We're working with several faculty teams right now to expand the kinds of grants that we have access to. In October, I'm working with a group of electrical engineers, but it's really an interdisciplinary team, to put in, I think it's an $87 million grant through the Grid Resiliency and Infrastructure Program, right? Massive amount of resources that would be hugely transformative to the university. And we're simply unavailable to faculty members before the climate action commitment and before this commitment to opening up the campus space as a laboratory for experimentation, for energy monitoring, making all this data available. That's been an essential part of expanding the kinds of resources faculty get access to and scale of resources faculty get access to. So, there's a really strong opportunity here where the economic incentive and the political incentive, as well as the equity incentive, all have lined up around this educational initiative. And we really want to take advantage of the fact that these things, that the stars have sort of aligned in a way that they very, very rarely do on major issues in this country, to really push forward an aggressive and powerful living learning opportunity for students, faculty, and staff. So just in the interest of time, I'd like to open it up to questions now, but I'm happy to talk a little bit more about the class partnerships that we've engaged in, what some of those nitty-gritty things look like, and some of the vision. Come on in. What, yeah, you're not going to throw me off. And what programs we have in mind moving forward. But again, very new, very experimental. I welcome both questions as well as comments, which is very rare for academic space. I normally try to discourage comments, but I welcome comments right now. We need them. So yeah. Yeah.
The churches are working in this area. I'm working with Northside Presbyterian.
Yeah.
Earth Care. One of the pieces besides making things more sustainable is voting with your dollars.
Yes.
So there are some dirty banks that are still doing business and funding fossil fuel development.
Yeah.
And there are every large institution and older people have portfolios, and you need to look through how that's going.
Yeah.
Particularly in the area of telling people how to spend their money,
Yeah.
where to buy their gas or whatever, you step on people's toes. But,
Yeah.
That's part of it. We can't.
100%.
We can do all these things in sustainability and recycling and everything, and if the banks are still and other investors are still encouraging putting their money towards old technology rather than new, we're not gonna move into the change in technology that we
Yeah.
need in manufacturing and
Yeah.
transportation and so forth, so.
No, and that's a really important point. And part of the reason we're trying to bridge the gap between different colleges, I think hits right on this point, right? So on the one hand, students have been at the forefront for pushing for economic justice around this issue, getting our foundation, which is invested in a lot of these same funds that you're talking about at a much larger scale, to divest resources from the fossil fuel industry, right? That's been an ongoing effort since at least 2014, probably earlier than that. And I've worked with the Virginia Interfaith Policy Institute, or the Virginia Interfaith Institute for Policy. I forget the specific name, but I've been working with the Interfaith Policy Institute that lobbies the state, mostly around housing issues this year, but in the past they've done a lot of work with sustainability and climate action to try to affect the state policy around these issues. But to bring back to the call point, we need to liaison with the Pamplin College of Business. And we have several faculty partnerships in that college already who are invested in more sustainable business practices and investment practices. But for example, I was in meetings last year where a full professor in Pamplin was pitching a financial literacy program for undergraduates, right? We teach Title IX training, we teach DEI training, we teach campus culture training. We do a lot of trainings for first-year students, but one thing we don't do is financial literacy. And so he was suggesting this be a program that we enroll students in their first year to teach some modicum of financial literacy. And because of these partnerships with Pamplin, we can then go to them and say, hey, if we're going to move this forward, we would like to also see a sustainability component to that financial literacy to sort of start with 18, 19-year-olds about many of the problems that you're encountering in your community and at your church today. And so, when you think about college partnerships, you typically don't think about the College of Business for sustainability, but what you're hitting on is exactly why we need a truly interdisciplinary approach to addressing these issues so that we can get climate considerations embedded in all of these programs and everything that we do. And we're aware of it and heavily, we're limited by the people who are in the sort of scale of operations involved, and the amount of funding and all that jazz, but we are aware of it and are hoping to make sure that that's a reality. Yeah. Go ahead, John.
This has been a up and down road that we've had with this goal 10.
Yeah.
Climate Action Living Laboratory, and it's, many people involved in the climate action commitment consider this one the number one
Yes.
important issue.
Yeah.
This is the way we integrate this into the whole university.
Yeah.
And we, as you mentioned, have gotten a lot of faculty excited, interest about it. The hard part has been to really get leadership to embrace this.
Yeah.
A lot of the policies and programs in the university are distributed to the colleges.
Yeah.
And, getting college deans, the new dean of Pamplin, I think, is going to be all in on this. I mean, Pamplin has come a long ways, huge way. They've got one of their most popular minors now is in environment and sustainability and governance out of the finance department.
Yeah.
My buddy Art Collins' department, but there's Danny Cochran. Danny's
Danny's here.
Emily's sitting here.
Emily's there.
Yeah.
Of course, I have to comment that Danny Cochran is one of the founding fathers of our sustainability effort on campus. So, kudos to him. But anyway, this barrier of getting leadership into the provost office to really help push this forward has been a challenge. And one of the ways to get their attention is, maybe through these big funding mechanisms. If we can land one of those, it's like, oh, I guess there's something to this.
Yeah.
But anyway, it tends to be a big barrier. And even though I love your horizontal leadership, what was it?
Leaderful movements,
movement. It's still in this university incumbent on, and particularly on the academic side, the deans to really become, our friends. And we had, 5 deans write supporting letters for us in the destination area proposal. But I think that, they have an interest in that as well. So
Yeah.
we've got to both look at our breadth of faculty, but also some strategic
Absolutely.
leadership points that will, help carry this forward.
Absolutely, and you'll be pleased to know, I didn't get into the weeds of this in the presentation, but you'll be pleased to know that as I developed the sort of, we've gone through several, and John, you know this, but just for the sake of the audience, we've gone through several back and forths on what the call should look like. Should it be like a formal institute that then competes with IPG? Does it want to be like, a more informal structure that's sort of the social network of faculty? I think we settled on somewhere in between that. And we tried to pitch it as a destination area for the second round of that because that's run through the provost office. It would give us the high-level support we need as well as the cross-cutting support. But we were ultimately unsuccessful, but for very odd reasons. Not because the provost office didn't support it, but because they felt that it didn't quite fit the call of the destination areas. It needed to be a sort of higher-level initiative, and they liked the vision, but less so the implementation structure. And so, as I write up this sort of proposal and develop a sort of leadership structure for it, the first idea is to go to the provost office and really emphasize the need for their high-level buy-in on this. And whatever gets housed needs to be housed either at that level or between colleges, or have an understanding from the deans collectively that this is an inter-college opportunity for growth. And so that is at the front and center of all these decisions. In fact, part of the reason that I developed settled on a horizontal leadership structure is to try to strike at that tension between we need a formal enterprise to get this off the ground. It needs to be supported at a high level, but it needs to not step on toes politically. And so the idea of a horizontal leadership structure allows me to sort of hopefully thread that needle and pitch that to the provost office as something that can be housed there, but not necessarily require the sort of influx of resources that they'll be a little bit nervous about because they don't like nobody likes spending money here. At the same time, not having it seem to be like a top-down dictum from the provost office that interferes with all the existing centers and institutes and policies that we have. And whether or not that becomes successful, I'm fully unsure about. I'm going to be bringing that to the CSER subcommittee, to the 150 faculty members to make sure we solicit input. But I just got approval of this vision on Monday, and so it's still very much a work in progress as we develop it, and the faculty will be front and center to provide input, as will the other stakeholders.
Yeah. And I think that working through the subcommittee,
Yes.
the case is the best way to do it.
I agree.
Because that is the way we advance.
I
And
agree.
all of it's documented, everything that's done is documented.
Yeah. And Todd just handed that over to me last month, actually, since he's had, Todd always does so much good for the university. After the destination area, he just hasn't had time to put into really championing this in the same way that I think he needs it. And so I got hired in the last couple of months. He is sort of turning it over and still working with him. And so there's a lot of changes in the last couple of months, but we're restructuring and moving forward quickly.